Todd Weston from Christian and Small in Birmingham, Alabama, and this is our latest episode of our new vlog, The Nonstop Advocate. Today we're switching gears a little bit, given what's going on in the United States and the world with the civil unrest, all tied to the George Floyd murder and the national discussion and the radical shift that's happened in our country with discussions on race. So we brought today a leader of our firm as well as a leader in the community to discuss some issues, and we're going to be looking at through a window of some charitable efforts that our firm has done over the past decade as our firm Christian and Small has partnered with Teach for America. So today, I'm proud to have on our managing partner and leader of our appellate practice, Debbie Smith. Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How about you?
I'm perfect. So glad to have you here. And then we have a special guest, is someone that our firm has worked with for years as we partner with Teach for America. We have Damon Bailey, who is an executive director for Teach for America Alabama. Good morning, Damon.
Good morning. How are you?
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, you know, I don't really want to talk too much today. I really want to focus on you two as your leaders in different roles. You know, with Debbie leading a law firm and having most recently shepherded us through, or continue to shepherd us through COVID-19 shutdowns. And I know there's also been challenges as it relates to schools. Undoubtedly, everybody knows that as well. So let's kind of kick off this discussion because I know over just this last few weeks, the world has changed, the country has changed. A lot of people, especially people like me, have had to take a long look in the mirror, and we've had to reevaluate things. And it's been forced upon us, and we're having these more difficult discussions, and it's what has to happen. And I think it's, you know, while these are difficult discussions, we need to have them. And so I'm really glad we're going to do this here today. And we're going to do this through the window of talking through our firm's long-term partnership with Teach for America. Debbie, I'm going to start with you. Christian and Small has celebrated 10 years with a partnership with Teach for America Alabama this year. How did that partnership come about?
Well, in an effort to have a more concrete effect in our community, 10 years ago, we went through a process of trying to figure out what causes, I guess is the best way to put it, everybody in the firm could really get behind. And I am a very strong believer in the power of education. And it turned out that everybody believed that education was where we should focus our efforts. And lucky for us, at the time, Teach for America was moving into and getting organized in Alabama. And we were looking for an organization to partner with so that we could really have an effect in the community. And Teach for America made a presentation. It was like, hands down, this is what we need to do. And it has been an incredible partnership. I hope Teach for America Alabama feels like that they have gotten, the organization has gotten as much from us as we have gotten from them.
So it kind of leads me to my next question. What's been the most surprising aspect of this partnership our firm has had with Teach for America?
Well, I think probably the most surprising thing for me is, well, two things really. One is how enthusiastic the Teach for America core members are and how invested they become in their schools and in the communities in which they're teaching and in the individual students. It is amazing to me the energy that they bring to their classrooms, the energy they bring to the school and to the community. They're starting organizations outside of school to support the educational efforts. They're across the board. They're doing things like one of the teachers started a Mandarin Chinese program and took students to China over the summer so that they could learn Mandarin Chinese. Just these incredible efforts that you think, why would you think that that is even possible, and how would you have the energy and the wherewithal to make that happen as a first or second year teacher? I mean, it's just amazing. The other thing that has just shocked me, and it's been a long time since I was in school, but I don't remember the enthusiasm that the students, I don't remember having the enthusiasm as a student that I see in the students in the Teach for America teacher classrooms. And I attribute that to the enthusiasm of the teachers. They're 100% every single day, and you can tell it in the way the students react. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, Debbie. Damon, I'm going to go to you, and we're so excited to have you here. And Teach for America, from my understanding of the program, it takes outstanding leaders and it puts them into under-resourced schools all across the country. And probably more so than any other organization right now, you guys are almost founded on really the principle that there are differences right now in the country, that there are betweens of class and resources. So I think you're a perfect person to have to have on here to discuss a lot of these issues that are going on. But maybe, Damon, you could start with telling us exactly what Teach for America is and how you got started with your core work and what brought you to Alabama.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I want to say thank you so much for having me on here today. I'm really excited and really grateful for the chance to get to have really important discussion. From my own perspective, I really think it's just a very important one. And, the time in which we're in right now as a country, I think it's really critical that we all be really present to this moment and figure out exactly how we can engage in more honest, hard, and important conversations about the connection between race, equity, and people's experience in America. So, and also, I want to say thank you for the support of Christian Small for the past many years that we've been an organization here in Alabama. I think that without that support, we wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff that Debbie just mentioned before with our work with teachers and our impact with students. And so we know that it's going to take really incredible and committed folks who support us. And you all have been such a model for what it looks like to really believe in and really demonstrate that belief with your commitment to our organization and students and everybody. So the Teach for America is essentially a nonprofit organization, like you mentioned, that finds some of the best and brightest leaders across the country. And we get those leaders to commit at least 2 years to teaching in a classroom that is typically in a community that's characterized by having extraordinary economic challenges. And therefore, there's typically also that follow pretty significant and stark differences in outcomes that happen in those communities and those schools as it relates to educational achievement. And oftentimes in schools that are literally 5 miles up the street that have a very different profile and a very different demographic. And so we place these really, really committed and passionate leaders in the classroom. We expect them to have an impact in those 2 years. We provide coaching and development and support. But our expectation is that you go in and you actually prove to the entire world and to yourself that it does not matter how much a student might, it doesn't matter the family situation a student might come from, it certainly doesn't matter around your economic class. You can achieve when given the right conditions and the right opportunities. And so in those 2 years, we expect those teachers to do just that, be able to raise the student achievement in their classroom and bring a wealth of other opportunities and resources to bear as well, their own relationships, et cetera. And from that experience, we're helping them learn lessons about what it takes to be a leader, and also we help them learn lessons about all the things that create inequity in the system, right? Well beyond just a quality teacher. There are so many other things that impact the quality of the educational experience and therefore also impact outcomes for students. And we're helping them actually learn those lessons and see the ways in which they play out with their students. And they take those lessons and they make a choice to do something that will impact that for the rest of their lives. And so, and we know that it's going to take an influence from a variety of sectors, but they take those classroom experiences, they take the relationships they built, and then they go and pursue a career that literally helps them be able to do the thing that they believe will be the highest impact on changing and shaping the conditions for more educational equity writ large across the entire country. So this is really not a 2-year endeavor. We kind of tell them once they come to induction, like, surprise, this is a lifelong commitment. So that's pretty much, I guess, the basis of Teach for America. I joined the Corps in 2009, right after college in Atlanta, Georgia, taught in a Title I school in Southwest Atlanta neighborhood. Ended up staying a year beyond my 2-year commitment because I believe it wasn't finished yet. But I mean, I think I pretty much might be an example of the model. In those 3 years, I learned a whole lot about inequity and the ways in which communities have been siloed from opportunities and resources. And so therefore that creates a host of challenges in a variety of systems, especially the education system. And it was my theory after those 3 years that if we just have a really high quality teacher in every classroom, we can see something significantly different for students. And so I went off to be a coach for a couple of years and then had the opportunity to be a coach of coaches. But then I began thinking about all the other kinds of things that a teacher doesn't necessarily have control over, like things in the community, et cetera. Like, what about the housing, quality of housing that our students are emerging from? What about the quality of resources, the access to those resources? And so then I joined a nonprofit for 3 years. I was actually doing more holistic neighborhood transformation work. But what I found is that even when you think about a housing intervention or a healthcare intervention or some transportation interventions, you still have to have a cradle to college pipeline education. Like, you have a high quality educational program in that community to be able to sustain the transformation, but to also make sure that we're actually creating economically mobile and thriving young people. And so that led me back to this work here in Alabama, where I'm committed to just figuring out exactly what it's going to take in the next 10 years to double the number of kids that are on a pathway towards economic mobility.
That's so
So
awesome.
that was a really long answer, so I hope I answered all your questions.
No, that was perfect, and I think you gave us a really good view of what the program is and what you're doing. And I do want to talk about kind of the unique challenges that the Corps faces here in Alabama. Like you mentioned, that there can be differences between just 5 miles, and I think it could be shorter. Like you look at Birmingham, we have the over the mountain communities, and then you have the city of Birmingham, and that's less than 5 miles, and the differences couldn't be brighter, really, between the two in various parts of the school. But then, in Alabama, we also have, very poor rural parts of the state as well. So, can you maybe talk about just some of the unique challenges facing Alabama in terms of education quality?
Yeah. So I think there are a few things that kind of come that I think are unique to the Alabama context. I think I'll firstly start by saying, children are children across the entire, country, right? And so when I think about the students that I had the chance to work with in Atlanta, and I think about the students that I had the chance to watch our teachers work with in Birmingham and some of our other rural areas, children come in with dreams of their own, extraordinary potential. And what we see then, the reason why they're not able to meet those dreams or be able to pursue those dreams is because the opportunities just do not exist in some of those communities. And so I think what is unique to the Alabama context, I think you named just one thing. So for our rural areas, there's just such, I think that they're just so far remote from 21st century connectivity. And when we think about broadband connectivity, when we think about digital equity, some of our rural communities right now are just so disconnected from what it would take to actually even bring to bear the device, actually having the devices that they need to actually be equipped with 21st century skills and actually having the connectivity as well. And so just looking at that as one symptom of something broader, I think right now, even in our curriculum, we're just not necessarily really thinking about the 21st century kinds of opportunities and skills our students really need to be truly competitive in the marketplace when they get older. And they also don't have the resources or the opportunities, the technology opportunities that would allow for them to do that. I also think we have a teacher shortage issue here too. I think, our entire state is very aware of that, and that we just see a steady decline in people actually wanting to pursue teaching as a full-time career. And so therefore we're seeing huge and significant gaps in high quality teachers in schools. And those gaps are even more exacerbated, if you will, in the communities that are characterized by economic disadvantage. So you have huge gaps in really critical, like high need placement areas, like math and other critical subjects. And I think the last thing is too, I think like, Alabama, unfortunately, doesn't really have a formula, a school funding formula that really takes into account the demographics of the students that the school system actually serves. And so in your lowest income communities, you do not see any equitable kinds of investments that would allow for them to even be at par with some of the other more affluent communities, because our funding formula doesn't really allow for equitable distribution of resources to communities that actually need more resources because of the demographic profile of the students that they serve. And so therefore you see significant gaps in what school systems are able to actually provide to their students because the money just isn't there. And if the money is just not there, you can't buy the tools, you can't buy the resources, you can't buy the curriculum, you can't buy the things that actually would allow for them to have a fighting chance at getting a high quality education.
Well, we're here in Birmingham. It's known as the birthplace of civil rights, and yet what's been shown since the murder of George Floyd, which has spawned nationwide and actually worldwide protests, is that there's really a lot that we have left to be learned, and many more discussions that need to be had while folks need to be intentional. So Debbie, I'm going to pass it over to you. As a managing partner of Christian and Small, and you're an active, engaged in the business and the community here, what can business leaders do, and how should they address this unrest and these discussions that are happening right now in our community with employees?
Well, I think that first and foremost, we have to acknowledge the issue. It's so easy for a business to ignore what they can characterize as a social issue. And it doesn't affect my business, so I don't have to address that with my employees. I don't have to address it in the community. So I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge the problem, and we have to talk about the problem. Everything goes back to education in my mind across the board. And so I think acknowledging what the issue is and educating people about what the issue is and the cause of the systemic racism in our society. And, we're 150 years past slavery, and we're 60 years past the civil rights movement. So it's very easy for a white person to say, well, that's history. That's not where we are now. I didn't cause that. It's not my problem. Well, it's everybody's problem. And I think we've all got to own it. We've got to call it out when we see it. We've got to talk about it. Our history is ugly. And for white people to talk about it, it's very difficult because we haven't experienced it. We haven't experienced those residual effects of racism. And it makes us uncomfortable to talk about it. But we've got to talk about it, and the more we talk about it, the easier those conversations are, and the easier it is for us to learn and to come up with creative solutions. I think that is the first step for all of us, is to acknowledge the problem and to learn about the scope of it, the causes of it, and to call it out when we see it.
Damon, I'm going to go to you. As a leader of teachers coming into our state to teach and lead our young people here, what is your message to these teachers as they head into the classroom for the first time, especially with what's going on right now in the conversations that are happening in the country?
Well, I think it's exactly what Debbie just mentioned just a few minutes ago. The first thing we share with our core members is that this work has everything to do with race. And so we're going to talk about that. The first conversation that they have as a part of their formal orientation and induction to the program are conversations about the ways that their racial identity might influence the assumptions that they might make about their students and about this work, the way that they just view it, their worldview, just writ large, like how your background, racial background has influenced your worldview. And so without necessarily putting that front and center, people are not necessarily going to really have the tools to be able to kind of examine the ways that race plays a role in their success and in the way in which they're going to be able to connect with their students, as well as the significant disparity and opportunity that you see in school districts that you'll be placed in. And so the message that we usually tell our folks is that, as uncomfortable as it might be, this is something that is going to be critical to your success. And it is central to the reason why we see gaps in outcomes. And quite frankly, it's not just education that we're talking about. We're talking about outcomes, any quality of life indicator or measure that you might think of. We begin to see such significant gaps between, quite frankly, white folks and Black folks. Mm-hmm. And we really want our folks to really ask themselves, well, why? Why is that true? Why do we see such large gaps in wealth? Why do we see such significant gaps in educational achievement? Why do we see such significant gaps in imprisonment? All of them. I mean, there's such significant, and then so we get them and we prime them to really ask themselves the question as to why. And then we give them some language around exactly what it means to kind of really deeply examine all of this through the lens of race in class. And so and when it comes to this moment in time, I think what we're seeing is just a symptom of what we know to be true and across our entire country. And that racism is still alive and well, and it's having a significant impact on people's experience with all of the systems that they experience in America. And quite frankly, it's having an impact on their outcomes and opportunities also.
And this is kind of a segue into the next topic we're going to have, but this is kind of a subject that's really hit me as we've been having these intentional discussions, these continuing efforts to have these discussions. Is that there's a tendency for people sitting in my shoes to say, well, I'm colorblind, and it is a way to make us feel better, and to say and to kind of brush it aside, and I've heard it said, and it sat with me now, is to say that's actually, I think the sentiment is good, but that's not the way we need to be looking at things right now, because it's ignoring the issue by saying you're colorblind. What are your thoughts on that, Damon?
I agree. You're completely ignoring the issue if you say you're colorblind. Otherwise, you're not really going to be. I mean, I understand that it's important to think about the ways that you individually relate to, treat others that might be different from you. And so therefore, I understand that there's like the push and the motivation to use language like that to ensure that you are just giving everybody a fair treatment, if you will. But if you do not actually think about the ways in which people of color are experiencing, like I mentioned before, systems in America, and if you don't necessarily take a look at the ways in which outcomes are so different with different, as it relates to a variety of things, then you really won't be able to actually address the issue head on and say that Black people, brown people, whatever, are having a very different experience, and it's actually causing them to have a greater set of challenges as it relates to the education, their education, as it relates to their employment opportunities, as it relates to any of those things. And quite frankly, like I would want and expect folks, and when I think about folks, I think about white folks in particular, who right now enjoy the privileges of many systems like working to your advantage, to really acknowledge and recognize that. Because if without it, you won't be able to actually allow yourself to really examine the ways, the differences in outcomes, exclusively based on race and color.
Debbie, has that kind of resonated with you, that message of going from the colorblind, where it's like you're trying to mean well, but then realizing it might not be the right message?
Oh, absolutely. I think that most people think of themselves as not having racist tendencies, and that they like to think of themselves as treating everyone the same. Now, there's some factions that's probably not true, but the thing that I think we have to shift our thinking about is, and it's an implicit bias kind of training, that you think about your biases toward people that are like you. And if you look at it from that standpoint, then what you're doing is you're disadvantaging the people that don't look like you. And that is a result of racism. It's because we haven't interacted as much with people who aren't like us. And we have to start having those conversations about why that is. And just saying, oh, well, I'm colorblind, and, you know, I don't need to have that conversation. Well, not true. We all need to have those conversations.
And I think that's really part of what, oh, go ahead, Damon. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And I think the other thing there then too, if you kind of operate with a colorblind lens, it does not really allow, you kind of form the wrong conclusions or the wrong assumptions, or you might make some wrong assumptions about why you might see failures, I guess, if you, I don't want to necessarily say, maybe that might be the wrong word, but why you see, like, you know, you may characterize something as a flaw in character versus a flaw in opportunity, as to why a child maybe didn't pursue a pathway towards college, as to why a certain group of people haven't actually achieved at the same levels or similar levels as others, without necessarily looking at as race as a cause. You kind of look at it as character flaws, something that's happening in the family structure, something that's happening, their own motivation. If they were just motivated enough, we might see a difference in their educational outcomes and achievement. And it really doesn't take into consideration that we're seeing differences, not because of those things, family structure, motivation, et cetera, but because that there's just, it is exclusive because they haven't been given the opportunities, and those opportunities have been stripped from them. And you begin to see trends and color playing a role in that, like race playing a significant role in that. Who gets what?
Yeah. You know, and it's difficult to discuss these issues. Let me put it this way. It's difficult for white people to discuss these issues of race and racism and discrimination, and especially white privilege. And though over these last couple of weeks, you know, it definitely feels as if we're at a tipping point where people are hungry for these conversations. You know, I'm going to put it to Debbie first. You know, you see these conversations changing, and you see this as like a real tipping point and a movement happening. And does this feel different, and how so?
It does feel different, and I so do hope this is a tipping point. You know, I think about it seemed very quick that we tipped the balance on same-sex marriage, and we tipped the balance on the Me Too movement. And it seemed, I know it wasn't quick in, you know, the broader view, but it was like suddenly it happened. And I feel like, and I hope that that is what this is, that suddenly people are paying attention, and it really is going to be the tipping point that changes things. Now, I don't think anybody suffers under the delusion that there's a quick fix to this. But I do feel like that there are a lot of people now that are really paying attention, and there are a lot of people that want to find solutions. And you know, that's progress. You know, I think that the more stories we can hear about the experiences of our Black peers with racial issues, I think that's really, really important for those of us who grew up white privileged individuals. You know, I think about how powerful seeing the George Floyd video was, and how it was just like, oh my gosh, how could that happen? Well, I think the stories that our peers can tell us about what has happened to them can have that same power to make people really want to affect change. I would love to see, and you know, talking about education and what Teach for America has done to prepare the teachers going into classrooms. Well, unfortunately, those aren't the classrooms that need the teaching on these issues, by and large. It is the white privileged classrooms that really need this education. And I would love to see something like, I think when my children were in elementary school and junior high, there was this Say No to Drugs campaign. And it was very effective starting in kindergarten. And my kids would come home saying, say no to drugs, say no to drugs. And I would love to see something like that starting that early, that people understand what racism is, what the effects it has are, and how we can move past our ugly past.
Damon, in your view, how can we move to have more open and honest discussions where people are actually really hearing each other?
Yeah, I think it first starts off by creating the conditions for really trusting and vulnerable conversations to even exist. And so, like, you know, Debbie mentioned, I can see a world where people might be a bit afraid to talk about their own experiences just because the conditions haven't been set for us to have open, honest, safe, brave conversations. Yeah. And so I think, you know, I think it's first, if we're going to do this in a really, if we're going to begin to have, we're going to see these conversations happen regardless of, you know, where they might happen. I think you have to create conditions for people to be able to honestly tell the truth as they have experienced it, and for you to honor that as their truth. And so not to defend why that might have happened, not to, you know, make assumptions about what else could have been going on, but to really honestly listen and to validate that person when they tell you, this was my own personal experience with this thing. And I believe race had to have an impact with that, because when I talk to other peers who share the same racial backgrounds as me, we all have similar experience with this thing as well. And for folks to believe us when we say that, you know? Yeah. So I think it starts off, and I also think then too, we've got to get more proximate to people that are different from us. I think so often it's very easy to be in community, to be friends with, to be, you know, in jobs, really honestly too, certain industries where everybody looks exactly the same. You can go to industries where the majority of the folks that work there are white. And so it will be very difficult and challenging to really build that empathy, like Debbie mentioned, that you need to have to actually see the world through somebody else's eyes if you're not even close to or in relationship with people who don't look like you. Yep. So you've got to be, you know, what are your friends? How many friends do you have there that are different or other than you, right? How many times are you the minority in a situation? Are you in like communities? Are you in experiences? Are you in places where you are the minority sometimes in that situation? Like how often and how proximate are you getting to other people's experiences and to cultures to be able to build that empathy and to build that understanding of how other people experience this world? But I think that just broadens your own worldview. You're very narrow in your understanding of what's actually happening and what you see in the world if you're only surrounding yourself with people who are walking that same path as you and who look just like you essentially.
And it goes back to that term that we keep hearing, is that we need to be intentional.
Yeah.
It's such a broad term, but it really does apply to almost everything that we've been talking about today, right?
Yes, completely agree. I think, you know, you have to go out and seek those places because honestly, you could exist in this world and not have to do that. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, of just the way that the world is structured, right? And the way that it's, you know, things, but you can do that. But you have to be really intentional about seeking out those opportunities and being really intentional about creating spaces where you can have those honest and vulnerable conversations.
Well, we're going to wrap this up in a sec. So what I want to do though is I want to bring this topic up and give it to both of you. And I think I'll start with you, Debbie. Even if you're not paying attention, you've heard the terms Black Lives Matter and white privilege. You can't help it. It's in the news everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. But it seems like in the last couple of weeks, those terms have both kind of radically changed. What are your thoughts on that, Debbie? It's a tough question.
Well, I think that we being the white community generally, saw the Black Lives Matter movement as sort of radical is not really the right word, but it was a social movement that really didn't have anything to do with us. And I think that the Black Lives Matter label, I guess, now has changed. It's not just about Black Lives Matter. It's about equity for everybody. And I do think that the white privilege label has sort of changed also, because I think at one time it was sort of viewed as a money issue. And while that is part of the issue, it's so much bigger than that. It is having all of the opportunities, or so many more opportunities on average, than a Black individual has in approaching what they want to do with their life. So I do feel like it's changed. Both of those things have changed radically, and they're coming together in a way that I hope will really affect some change.
What are your thoughts, Damon?
Yeah, I think that if you believe that all lives matter, then you've got to believe that Black lives matter. So I think, like, I think that I'm feeling a sense of optimism, just because I'm realizing that folks are becoming more aware that, like, this, when thinking about this policing issue, of course, there's so many other issues, that there is a clear difference in the way that Black people are being treated by police, and unfortunately being murdered by police. And so therefore, if we are going to see something different, we have to exclusively call out that Black lives, literal lives, actually do matter. And we've got to do something significantly different in addressing these issues so that we can see more Black people being able to live full and complete lives. And I do believe that there are interventions, of course, that need to happen with, our policing system. But the other thing that I'm hoping is also true is that people are beginning to see that it is well beyond just the policing system, if you will. It spans everything, right? So if you really believe Black lives matter, then how do you overinvest in Black communities that are under-resourced right now, so that the children in those classrooms get to see a full life full of potential and possibility? Because if those Black children's lives matter, then they're going to be given an extraordinary educational experience that allows them to be whatever they want to be in this world: economically mobile, thriving, happy young people, right? If you want to see Black lives matter, then you got to think about health disparities and what needs to exist in our health systems and structures, so that we can continue to see, a significant and demonstrable impact in the number of African-American people being able to live full, healthy lives, actually, and not be subject to, to chronic disease and other things that are just exclusively exacerbated in the African-American community. So my hope is that, yes, I think the impetus is the fact that we're seeing such a significant amount of Black people being murdered by police, but I hope that everybody understands that that's a symptom, something very deeper that is embedded in many of the systems that we see across America. And if we truly believe that Black lives do matter, then we've got to figure out how do we actually center Black people as we think about education, as we think about economic opportunities, as we think about healthcare, as we think about housing, because all of those things have disproportionately also impacted Black people, Black folks, in a really significant and pointed way.
I think we need to end on that note, because that was fantastic, Damon. And that was a really good statement. And so, but what I'm going to do, and I appreciate both Debbie and Damon, you guys coming on today, is I'm going to put you both on the spot that we're going to continue this conversation again in a few months, and see how things have changed in the future. So I hope you'll do that with us. So Damon, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was awesome. Debbie, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Until next time, guys, thank you so much. Have a good day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.